So recently, at the September Nintendo Direct, we did indeed get a future roadmap for the N64 games going forward all the way into 2023 for Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack. However, one console that was missing is of course the Sega Genesis, and in today's video I want to break down the brand new update that just hit the service, boot up some of the new games together, share my initial impressions as well as some nostalgia for these titles, and also have a conversation around what we can expect when it comes to Sega Genesis support and Nintendo Switch Online and the update schedule going forward. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. Now, as I mentioned, guys, we are now today looking at the brand new update that just shadow drops out of nowhere when it comes to Genesis titles now for Nintendo Switch Online, as we have a few brand new games to check out. We're going to hop into Elysia Dragoon. I am most pumped to check out Earthworm Jim again because I have heavy nostalgia for that game. Many Genesis games rather I did not grow up with because I actually did not own a Sega Genesis back in the day. I had a lifelong friend that he's still a great friend to this day that actually had it, and I would walk across where I grew up in the apartment complex, walk across the courtyard and play all the Genesis titles over there, and I owned the SNES, so he would come over to play the SNES games, and that's just how you did things as a 90s kid. But you know, there's a lot of titles that I missed out on because I didn't own a Genesis, this being one of them, and I gotta say that this seems like a pretty solid update, but it is notable. So at one point in time, we definitely had a little bit of a heads up when it comes to Nintendo adding in these games onto the service. As you may remember, we've made numerous videos whenever the Nintendo status bot spots maintenance for things like the Genesis app or the SNES app or even the N64 app before. So we kind of knew, we kind of had a little bit of a heads up, even though Nintendo has been pretty good about shouting out the N64 games in advance. But most of the time we just get shadow drops, but we kind of had a couple days, day or two to actually look at that Nin status bot on Twitter, and you would notice that if that was scheduled for maintenance for any of those apps, 9 times out of 10 you could expect a new batch of games. I think Nintendo has actually figured out how to avoid that, even though they have to do maintenance to these things. I don't know how they do it behind the scenes, but the last few updates for the last few months have all avoided that notification, so they really truly have been surprise shadow drops. And I have to figure out how to select. I think I just ran out of ammo somehow. I'm not entirely familiar with the controls in this game, and you know, action side scroller, a little bit of platforming elements, but definitely like crazy sporadic just enemies on screen. I'm sure you get different power-ups and things. I believe this one, I don't know how popular it really was, but I think it's one of those games that definitely has somewhat of a fan base. It always throws me off too. It seems like when you walk in and then walk out of a screen, it shows demo on screen for some reason. But I do think that the Genesis support has not been bad in recent updates. I mean, we got Mega Man the Wily Wars collection, which is actually a remastered collection, kind of Mario All-Stars style of the original 3 Mega Man games. So they've actually added in some quality titles, I would argue, not to mention they have one of my all-time favorite games, which is Gunstar Heroes, available on the service. Fantastic game to go through and play co-op with a friend, start to finish. Genesis really did have some banger games, and you know, the more continued support that we see, the better the expansion pack ultimately gets when it comes to value. And the one thing that you can definitely expect is that the only type of system we're going to see Nintendo go out of their way to do advanced hype announcements and trailers and kind of a roadmap, if you will, when it comes to their games will be the N64. We will continue to see Genesis games kind of shadow dropped like this, and I do think that that's going to be the format going forward. Now, we will quickly hop into the next game on our list here so we don't just spend too much time on just this one. And I am playing on the Super Nintendo controller, any SNES controller from Nintendo Switch Online, of course, because, well, I couldn't bring myself to actually purchase that $50 Sega Genesis controller when this was $29.99 and plays fantastic. Why they justified a $50 price for a Genesis controller with 3 buttons, mind you, not the 6-button Japanese edition, but 3 buttons rather. You have to pay $50 for that. So I don't know how many characters I can even do here. It looks like it's I'll just do null. No, why not? You know, let's just make this quick and easy for the video. I don't know what to expect of this game at all. I've never seen it, never heard of it, other than just a brief gameplay snippet that I saw in Nintendo's trailer, which didn't look bad, to be fair. I'm sure if you have nostalgia for all 3 of those titles, you'll enjoy them that much more. I'm saving the best for last, which is Earthworm Jim, in my opinion, because that's the one out of all these titles that were added in that I remember the most and have the most nostalgia for and had the most fun playing. So I'm really excited to get into that, and we won't spend a whole lot of time in this game just because I do want to get to that game next. But I kind of wanted to see, you know, what the mechanics felt like. Looks like I have low battery notification on my controller. That's great. I think we'll be able to get through the video though. And you know, this so far feels like as long as you are aiming in the right direction towards enemies and you hit that B button as fast as you can, it seems like you're probably going to be all right. I don't know if this gets difficult later on. Not a bad art style, interesting perspective, the overhead kind of diagonal view, whatever that's called. You know, just games that I like to see. We're talking 3, 4, sometimes 5 Genesis games get thrown in at a time in terms of the update. So the nice thing is it's quickly, I'm sure I probably should have seen what's in the chest here. Just let's see if we can get a cheese wheel. Okay, well, that just reminded me of Speedy Gonzalez. Shout outs to that game. That's a fantastic, like kind of Mario-esque platformer style game that I remember playing quite a bit on the SNES myself. And he was all focused on cheese, of course, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about this Oasis game that I know very little about. 3 games added in on this update. We've seen other updates support 4, sometimes 5, and I just think that that's how Nintendo does all of Genesis games going forward. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the list of titles that we saw when that data mine hit, which I'm sure will ultimately most likely end up being accurate, because it's the data mine essentially showed how many slots Nintendo has planned in for future games when it comes to N64 and Genesis. I believe there was something like 55 Genesis games that will ultimately be in this library, and then we have 38 or 35, something like that, in terms of Nintendo 64 games. And that sounds about right when you think of like the long term of the service. Now I'm stuck on this little mountain area here. I'm sure it's very easy to get past, but in interest of going to Earthworm Jim that I want to do, we will do that right now. So once I can figure out, there we go. I was pressing and holding when I just needed to return to game selection. So Earthworm Jim is one that I'm pretty sure a lot of people remember, because this was a very popular game at the time of its release. At least in my circle it was. It's just quality gameplay. And I think that this is one that, you know, whether or not Nintendo had to pay some extra licensing rights for this game, I'm not sure the entire history of who owns rights and things, but it's definitely one that you want to see, especially when you're talking about an expansion pack that cost, you know, $50 annually. And I do think, as much as you can complain about maybe one N64 game per month not being quite fast enough for your liking, I do think that Nintendo has, not at the start of the service, I was very skeptical of the price point at the start of the service. I do think they've come a long way with the emulation fixes that they've done to the N64 games that originally weren't running well. I had big complaints about that, noticeable input lag, lack of fog rendering, things just didn't look right or how you remembered them. And for $50 annually, you expect better, you expect more. And to Nintendo's credit, they quietly, didn't really acknowledge it, but they quietly continued to update the emulation behind the scenes. And so ultimately we are in a much better place now than we were back when the service launched. And, you know, games like Earthworm Jim being thrown in there, 3 to 5 Genesis games. Really, I think we've gone no longer than a couple months at this point without getting some kind of Genesis support or update. So I'm okay with this kind of release schedule. When you start to think that we now have 4 different consoles that can get updated on Nintendo Switch Online, it is an exciting prospect to think if Nintendo ever starts doing quality NES and SNES games again, and we have some exciting titles to look forward to on there, like Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, like some of the licensed games. Like I want to play Goof Troop. I want to play the old Mickey Mouse games from SNES. You know, there's a ton of nostalgic titles. If they get really crazy, the Star Wars games from the SNES era, like there's a bunch that I would love to go back and experience. And if we're talking about that alongside of one new N64 game per month, knowing that N64 games are typically more lengthy than these 2D ones, so we get at least one of those per month. I don't remember what to do here to progress, but we'll just mess around together. Oh, okay, sweet. I can literally run up the wall. We get one of those added into the service per month, in addition to 3 to 5 Genesis games every other month. And then we get, you know, a TikTok cycle maybe where the month we don't get Genesis, we get an SNES and NES update. Well, it's not going to be a bad thing as long as they pick quality games, and I think that's what it comes down to. And the fact that Earthworm Jim is in this definitely makes this a quality update for me. Not to mention that the Alicia Dragoon. So you know my knowledge is very not there with that game, but that actually, it's one that I'm going to play more. I didn't give it enough time for the video because I don't want to, you know, have you guys watching me here for 30 minutes playing these games, but it is one that I will go back and play more of. and it had good mechanics, and I do remember hearing about that game when I was a kid. So, you know, for me personally, I'm pretty happy with where Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack is at today. I do think that, you know, definitely the best way to justify the price, if you can, is if you can get friends and family on your account and do the family plan and split it with everybody. You're talking $80 for up to 8 accounts. So you really can't ultimately pay $10, but, you know, who has like 8 other people to get on there? Maybe you don't have that many, but even you could split it 1 or 2 ways, you're still quickly coming out ahead compared to, you know, paying it full price on the $50 annual price point yourself. But anyway, this is a brand new update, just dropped at the time of filming this video. I'll have this video up probably early the next day. So I want to hear from you guys, your personal thoughts and nostalgia. Do you have nostalgia for Earthworm Jim or any of the other games that were added into the service? Are you happy with the update schedule? And do you think that, yes, indeed, we're going to be looking at surprise shadow drops only for when it comes to things like Genesis games on the service? Or do you think maybe Nintendo will get weird and actually give us some kind of roadmap one day, and then that in turn ends up being you know, something different that they do with the Genesis cycle going forward? I definitely don't think we'll see that happen, but, you know, Nintendo's Nintendo at the end of the day, and anything's possible. So I'm getting completely clobbered by these crows or whatever they are. And will you just let me go already? Come on. So, you know, I want to hear from you guys on all things, just really the state of where we started with NSO plus expansion pack to where it's at now, because there's still plenty of people that I've seen in the comments say it's not worth it to them. They're not going to continue, you know, to pay for the service or sign up for the first time. To others, it definitely feels worth it. And I think, for me, in my book, and the variety of systems and updates that we're getting now, I continue to feel like it's worth it right now in this point in time. But regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before we leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen now. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.